Okay. Okay, looks like I am live. I just would like my setup to show me.
We got the notification on LinkedIn as well.
Yes, it is showing on LinkedIn that is so. Okay. Yes. Okay. So once I saw on LinkedIn, I just saw how my setup is different. Okay. Okay, I'm ready, people. I'm just going to look like I'm sitting in a well. That's okay. Bear with me. Okay. I am Sudha Jamte. Let me do a recording here to be in the safe side. I'm Sudha Jamte, and this is Weeklywed. Weeklywed is usually hosted by Yash, and is our global speaker series. And periodically we get into a webinar mode. And since we are having this Global South in AI project going on with a call for paper, we have lots to talk about and lots to learn about language AI. So we've had a couple different webinars. And what we are going to do today is, the topic is women equality and NLP. And I'm specifically going to focus on word embeddings. And I'm going to tell you what I know. We're going to have a discussion when possible. And we'll see where we go. So I'm not going to make it too structured, but it's going to be very academic focus with what I prepared, but not just me talking to slides. And you'll see why in a minute. And for those of you who are regulars here, you can chat here in Zoom and give your name and where you're joining us from. We have quite a global mix of people, and we are very big on being sensitive and giving people's name right and all that stuff. And this is being recorded on Zoom, and actually is live streamed on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. And I'll use that to go share that in my newsletter so it can reach a wider audience. And it usually goes to my students. I teach artificial intelligence bootcamp for product and business managers at Stanford Continuing Studies. In fact, my fall semester registration just opened up on Monday, and I'll be teaching from mid-October. And it's live online classes, so anybody can join from anywhere. So my student mix is becoming more and more international. I also teach AI ethics at Barcelona Technology School. Okay, so what are we talking about here? So I see a lot of my students, and I see some new faces here on Zoom, and people on Zoom are the ones who get to ask questions. You can raise your hand or chat questions if you don't want to be in the recording. And definitely, if you don't want to be in the recording, make sure that you're off camera. And for others who are watching this, I'm not going to be able to come to all channels, but on LinkedIn, I'll be watching. So if you have questions or comments, or you have experience on the topic that we're talking about, feel free to add something to the comment, and I will check, and I'll come back later also, and then and share and respond. So that's how we keep it as a fun discussion. Okay, so today is our deadline for the call for paper at Global South in AI at NeurIPS. So for those of you who have been talking to me or Susanna and have a paper or abstract that you're working on, today is the deadline, and it is in California time. So here it is morning 9 o'clock. So you have the whole day left, but all we are asking is a 250 word abstract. And I'm not going to go back into the specifics of it, because you can go to globalsouthinai.org and just submit a abstract, or you can come to our Slack group, which is also Global South in AI, one word, .slack.com, and talk to us if you want to make it public and find a partner, like some people are doing right now, to collaborate and say, I know that this is a topic dear to me. I don't have a tech background and language models, or there's a lot of complexity and it would help to have a co-author. You'll find a partner, or just talk to us. Is this viable topic? Is somebody working on it? And we are specifically open to work in progress abstracts where you are working on something and you're stuck because you don't have the data for it, or it seems like a complex problem and you've not solved it. That's the sweet spot we are going for, because believe me, you're not alone. There are a lot of people in the world might be working on a different language that's not related to you, but have similar problems, and will help you get to that. And this is going to get you to NeuroIPS, which is an amazing, amazing AI conference and an amazing opportunity to go in December. And if you can't go in person, you can attend hybrid also. Okay, so because of that, we've been talking about language AI, which is amazing because that takes me to a whole different world. And I'm a person who chases autonomous vehicles and talks about that, and talks about inclusive AI in autonomous vehicles. And even yesterday, I saw an Apple car and couldn't resist the temptation to tweet a picture. And language is everywhere. You don't need to go driving, or you don't need to go anywhere. And language, when I'm talking and you're talking, we all have, multiple languages and different nuances and things like that. Okay, so let me first see whether, people here know what is word embedding. Maybe there are people who are experts than me. I see a new person, Yaini Nieka. Would you like to introduce yourself? And if you don't want to, there's no problem at all, or you can do it on the chat also if you want. I just want to make sure, because I usually know everybody here because they're my students. So if you feel like, you're welcome to introduce yourself. Yes. Okay. I'm going to call on Sam, because I can be talking about NLP and language AI and have an expert in the room who knows more than everybody else. So Sam, happy to have you here. Are you able to speak?
Everyone. Yeah, can you hear me, Sada?
Yes.
Great, okay. Thank you.
So
yeah, over to you, sorry.
So there are, I want to give some context on calling on Sam, and she's an expert in the room, because I'm not exaggerating. There are some people over the years, when I was not focused on language models at all, there are some people who have influenced me to think about it and get into that space, or even want to learn that. And I keep talking about my student, Aisha to Godape, who basically said about Hausa language, and it's a low resource language, which means you don't have enough recorded data set to train a language model. And she wanted to do that. And Sam, you are one of those people who knows so many languages, and your love of language is what drives your entire career. And Sam is one of those people who, of course, you must have seen a couple of weeks back, we did a replay of Sam's NLP webinar where she taught us. So Sam, can you give us your own intro?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course I can. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Sada, and I appreciate your kind words. And I can give you a quick introduction.
And if you're comfortable, you can be on air, but doesn't matter if you're not. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm just going to try and put my camera on. Just 1 second. I'm on a different computer today, so okay. So there we go. Hi, everyone. So you should see me. Hello. Yeah, so my background's in linguistics and in languages, and I sort of said I do enjoy learning new languages, whether they're European languages or languages that I've been exposed to when I've been traveling. I am a founder of an organization that is focused on building at the minute an NLP application for education. One of the things I'm really cognizant of is how sometimes poorly trained NLP models are when it comes to language. We often find that internationally we use applications that are trained on what we call the Eurocentric languages as well. And I want to move away from that and focus on underutilized languages, in particular in the global South. That's where I'm focusing my time at the minute. I'm a teacher as well, so I teach full time.
Can you take a step back? Yeah. I want to hear more about this, but can you take a step back and tell us about your overall background? Because you are one of those people who know technology, math, multiple languages, and God knows what else.
Okay, yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. Yeah. So my overall experience, I started out in 2008 as a graduate of economics and linguistics and languages. I studied overseas in Germany, and I studied in the UK. And I amassed a lot of experience in languages in business, and also just by living in the countries. I worked across different sectors before I went into languages and before I went into teaching. I got my degrees from universities in Lancaster and the University of Reutlingen. I then qualified as a teacher.
You're based out of UK, but remind me where you are.
Yeah, I'm based in Oxford. I'm based in South Oxfordshire, which is just outside the city. And it's not too far away from London, but an hour away from London commuting. Yeah, that's where I'm based at the moment. And yeah, I'm a linguist and a language teacher. I've taught in university. So I taught briefly at the University of Sheffield when I was living further north, and I teach in high schools and also taught adult courses as well. My organization is specifically delivering languages and STEM programs that engage young adults and professionals and really focuses on empowering them with the future skills that they will need going forward in AI and in technology. I have experience in my background in aerospace. I've worked in the oil and gas sector, in manufacturing, and also in business services, in consultancy. And I had quite a few years experience in the IT sector as well, as an analyst and as a data manager and a project manager as well. So yeah, that's where my core knowledge is. And then I became a teacher after that to transition away from the private sector. I've traveled across the US and Canada, Europe, and the Middle East as well. I spent quite a lot of time learning languages and spent some time in the Middle East as well as a teacher. And really, I want to use all of that experience and my technology experience to build NLP applications that reflect the society that we live in and the culture that we live in. And I'm just really keen on NLP and artificial intelligence.
So how did you get started with NLP? Because I remember you came here to Business School of AI and taught NLP and to build chatbots, right? So it is the application layer of NLP. And now we are interested going deeper into that, right? How the language and how linguists are looking at language and how it is being trained by technologists today is the realm we are going into. So I did not know about, more than the application layer of what you were focused on. So tell us a little bit about your focus on NLP, how you got into it, and where do you focus on that?
I got into NLP through I think essentially from learning about the applications that are available in the market. So particularly low code and no code applications, and also how to train machine learning models. I actually started out learning myself and learning what we mean by natural language processing, and brought in my knowledge of linguistics into that. And I started thinking about how I could develop tools for educators and for students after. I've obviously been part of the hackathon as well with Data Ethics for All, and I've been part of some of your courses as well. So that, and I learned, particularly during lockdown and before that, just a little bit more about the technologies available to AI engineers and designers and developers, and that you don't necessarily have to have a deep experience in coding and developing to actually build tools. And I did attend some of your courses, so that with Business School of AI, and then low code and no code courses last year, which really helped and supported me. So that's where I started. And now it's just a case of continuing to build on those on that experience and those tools to bring them to a wider market and to a wider audience, really. So in multiple languages, because we don't have that at the moment, and we do need that. And that's where my area of research is, and I'm currently looking to build my team around that as well. So yeah, does that answer your questions? Does anyone have any other questions?
Now I want to bring you back to what you were saying, and I interrupted you to bring you to your introduction. You were saying about you're building something about education and how it is taught as technology. Tell us a little bit more, and then tell me why you said it's Eurocentric and you want to bring global South languages into it.
Yeah, so I think just bear with me a second. I'm just getting connection issues. Bear with me a second. So the application I want to build, I'm building at the moment. The reason why I'm doing it is essentially because we have tools at our disposal in artificial intelligence and in NLP that are not trained accurately, really, at the moment to reflect the types of questions we have about the world we live in, about whether it's about math or economics or the sciences, purely because the models themselves, the pre-trained models and the data, the corpora, aren't really a true reflection of knowledge and human knowledge. And I want to be able to build something that does reflect that reality from a languages perspective and from a cultural perspective as well. And it's important that we look at not just the way that language is said, but also, as we talked about as well in other classes, the context of language. Body language is important, as is understanding culture and not just text, but also voice as well. So I want to bring in all of those different vectors into the applications themselves, because we don't have that. We know that those models are not really a reflection of who we are right now and our socio-technical and if you like, contexts. So that's where I'm focusing my energy right now. And I can see from what I know from my own languages background as well, that particularly in machine translation, the translation tools are very good in European languages, and they are getting much better, I think, for those that have studied those core languages. But they don't really exist for the Hausa language, for example, or for minority languages, and particularly those that are not used or underutilized in communities in the South. And we need to focus on that, I think. And it's about collecting the right data as well, because I know that data doesn't always exist for such models for those languages. And that's why I submitted my paper as well for the Global South Neuro IPS submission, because I think that's key. And I encourage other people to do the same as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. We're running a total double-blind
yes.
call for papers, so we don't know who is submitting and who's getting approved, and the
yeah.
reviewers are also don't know who's actually the submitter. They just see the content. It's unbiased that way, So
yes, yeah.
Thank you for encouraging everybody to submit, because I know so many people. We are open as program chairs. Me and Susanna and Yash are open to review and give feedback to people's ideas. Especially a lot of people are working on things, or they are at some stage of working on passion projects, but they think, oh, this is not full research, this is not papers, I'm not sure if this is viable, or there are variations of it, and so we kind of give a review. We are not looking at final drafts, and we don't know who's actually making a submission. But thank you for encouraging people to do that, so I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to remove, thank you. I'm going to remove Sam from the screen here. I see a lot of people, and I realized that when I was mentioning Inieka, she's actually Ine Yankee, and that's what I was thinking. That's the only other Ine I know, and she's from Kenya and runs Go Girls. She's been at our IoT Day event and shared about her work training girls to build IoT and repair IoT as a skill. So it's perfect, because today we are going to be talking about gender equality, but focused only on women, right? So we are saying women, how they are, language model is propagating bias from society, the misogyny from society. So I want to show you something. This is actually a deck from, let me check. This is from UCLA, from a NLP class. And you might have seen it before, but I want to give them credit because this is theirs. So look at this picture. And so a man and his son are in a terrible accident and are rushed to the hospital for emergency. The doctor looks at the boy and exclaims, "I can't operate on this boy. He's my son." How is that possible? Okay. So unless you've already heard about this, I want people to add a comment in the chat. And if you're watching this on LinkedIn, feel free to add a comment as an answer. So how is this possible? And if you want, I can read it out again. So a man and his son are in an accident and rushed to the hospital. The doctor looks at the boy and exclaims, "I cannot operate on this boy. He's my son." What does that mean? Okay, anybody else? And especially people who are listening from outside, I want to make sure that. Okay, I want to ask you, and you don't need to, even do a show of hands. I want you to think about it. How many of you heard this and thought about it for a minute, saying it's not possible? Yes. So how many of you thought the doctor meant a guy? And you don't need to raise your hand because that's not a happy thing to raise your hands on. That's bias, right? So the way NLP models are trained are they look at, they have words like female doctors here. They are trained with training the models with the words like female doctor, as if doctor is male. And so that is the beginning of bias. And I'm going to go again to the UCLA deck to get us on the same page on labeling. And Susanna Raj, the expert on labeling, is not allowed to answer this. Everybody else can. What do you see here? You can chat. What do you see here? Let me come back and see the chat. You can chat your answers, guys. Or you can call out if you want. Those of you who are here, you can just call out. What do you see here? Bananas, okay. My breakfast snack. Okay. So I'm going to go further down. I said I'm not going to show a deck. This is not my deck, so I think I'm kind of still saying that. So bananas is a very common thing to think about. This could be, the stickers on bananas to train them. This is what you would do, right? This is kind of same image you would give. So the stickers, and they're dole bananas because it says dole on the stickers. This is stacked bananas. If you see, it's not bananas on a tree. It is in a shelf. So it's a retail shelf, right? Bananas at a store or bananas on shelves. It is bunch of bananas, not one or two bananas. And we never say yellow bananas, right? So these are green bananas, they're unripe bananas, and then there could be ripe bananas. So the ripe bananas are usually like bananas with spots and yellow bananas. But the way models are trained, the basic banana, and you could just say it could be fruits, it's bananas, and then you say it's unripe banana. So the concept of taking a language, when we as humans can see everything, and now we have to train it, is you have to categorize the multiple differences so that you can teach the model the basic thing. And so if there are different dimensions to the banana, like we saw, that it's ripe, it's with spots, it's sitting on a shelf, it's a group. And it could be, if you're taking a language model and you're going to feed that to an AI, it's going to be a bunch of words and sentences and maybe a story or a document. The basics of language model understanding is you take different words and you try to reduce the dimensionality, right? There are many dimensions to the same word, and you try to minimize it so that you can teach it, hey, this is a banana after all, right? When you teach a kid a banana, even if you show a banana on a shelf or a bunch of banana, you're going to say banana, and that it has to learn banana. That's where we are going for. Now, when you get into complex language, let me see, there's a comment. Susanna is saying, to your earlier question, it is not explicit bias, it is implicit bias. This is, she's talking about the doctor and the female doctor. Susanna Raj is an AI ethicist, and I'm so glad she's here today. So she's basically saying to that previous question about the female doctor, it's not an explicit bias, it's an implicit bias. And that is formed by social construct. And there is no judgment. They're not looking at it and they're saying, hey, is this a female or a male doctor? And they can only call a male as a doctor because it's just social construct. Unless society changes, we will continue to have that bias. Okay, that's a very good point. So when you look at NLP and bias in there, today we are focusing on women equality and, you know, how women are not treated equal like the female doctor. Why do you have to say female as a doctor before that? Because that's exactly what happened. So what are we doing with NLP? We are taking existing documents, feeding it to the AI, and then, like the banana example I'm giving, we are trying to reduce the dimensionality to create words. And so that's how I'm getting to word embeddings. We're going to talk about that. And in that process, we are working on what we already have. That means we are going to propagate the bias that already exists in society. And so that is the foundation of all bias in NLP problems, not just against women. But so thank you for that, Susanna. So one school of thought is about, this is general about AI and bias, that it's going to take the bias that's already in society and it's propagating it. So when we are training AI, then we need to de-bias the AI and make the data more fair, in general AI, we have to make the data more inclusive. In this case, it is a social construct. And so it's taking that, and how do you kind of de-bias it, which means you have to consciously find data to tell the news story that you want to say. And so that's why when we're talking about AI in general, it's a huge field. But when we talk about NLP, it's not just you can build chatbots and there's chatbots everywhere and, you know, it can process documents. And there's a huge excitement about large language models like GPT-3 and how it's trained on the entire Wikipedia and the like. Language has a lot more data, and it carries, like Susanna said, it carries social construct, it carries histories, it carries culture. And how do you teach an AI all that? Or how do you get the data to be cleaned up so you can teach the AI right? And it's such an amazing thing because it's in such an early stage of where we are, even though this has been going on for a long time. So I'm going to get out of that the UC ALA deck, but that's very fantastic material there. So I'm going to share that. And thanks to Yash, because Yash was going to be here. So Yash ended up sharing some of her content with me. Okay. So anybody here who knows what is word embeddings, then maybe you can speak up and then I will listen. Otherwise, I will tell you what is word embeddings. Have you? Okay. So I'm saying we also need to take existing corpora and reduce this implicit bias as language reflects society, and make the data fair and inclusive. So there's a whole bunch of, there's a movement in making the data fair and inclusive. So the simplistic thing when we are thinking about Global South in AI, and you mentioned this, Sam, when we are talking about your work, saying you're focused on an application. So that's one approach in NLP where you take an application of what you're trying to do. Instead of saying language, and we want all languages to be understood by the AI and all kinds of language translations to happen. And there are many applications of this. It just takes a specific application layer to it. So even in our Global South in AI call for paper, we said you can submit on voice or language models or data, and you can give a model, you can just give a representative application from your world, which is not common out there, right? So if you're looking at, say, the job market, and I'm sitting here in US and speaking English, and I just thinking LinkedIn and jobs, right? But then if you're looking at jobs, and we had somebody from Mexico who was looking at, they are building a chatbot for local Spanish-speaking audience, but specifically for low-level jobs, and low-level jobs as in, minimum wage jobs, and help the employers find people and filter them on the right requirements, and they build a chatbot. And the existing NLP models that are out there, the pre-trained models from Microsoft and Google, could not work for them, because there is, these people are talking colloquial Spanish, and that too Mexican Spanish, and it didn't cut it for them. So they ended up building their own new transformer for this. And they're doing the same amazing thing of latest, greatest transformer models, but they had to go redo that for Spanish. And think about it. You hear about Spanish language being supported as one of the 7 languages by almost all tech companies. And you would look at it and do translations. I'm trying to learn Spanish from Duolingo. It's doing a very decent job. I go and use Google Translate. It has so far it has failed me very few times. And so I would think that it is done well. But then when you're trying to solve a local problem, talking about local people in different areas, and the same transformer that is built for Mexico might not work if they move to Colombia or Ecuador and look at it. So that even for one language, there are 4 or 5 variations, and you need the input from. So that's where we are going with the Global South, saying, come give us reference applications. Is embedding like making a text to become an acronym? Okay. I'm going to pause that question and come back to that. And I guess that's Suresh. Okay, so Sam already answered that too. So Suresh, you can look at the comment, but I'm going to come back to that, right?
No problem, Sudha.
Okay. Okay, anybody else who's worked with word embeddings or has heard the word, or especially I'm thinking, is there somebody from the linguistics world? Because I got introduced to the word embedding from tech, from language AI. And in fact, I learned it from bias in AI, in NLP, and then backtrack from there and understood what is word embedding. So, for my students who are in technology, my kind of approach to answer this would make sense. But the reality is the word embeddings comes from linguistics. So I'm going to read out Sam, credit where credit is due. So Sam is basically saying word embedding is a learned representation from text, where words that have the same meaning have a similar representation of a word. So what it means is, I'm going to, unpack that, Sam. Thank you for that. So essentially, we are going to feed documents to the AI, and the documents are made of language paragraphs and sentences. And so the first thing we do is we take the words, like we go back to the banana, and if it is in a sentence, we are going to say and make the word banana with a lot of different dimensions to it. That is why I said reducing dimensions of words is the easiest way to help the AI understand that. And so the word embeddings is essentially taking similar words and trying to reduce the dimensions. And let me get back proper definition of it. So if there are words which have, it's basically words that have the same meaning should have a similar representation. So Sam, can you give an example that's not bananas?
Let me think. Maybe we'd have cities. So could we look at capital cities, for example, and give them a representation? Across. So if we're looking at Rome, Paris, Italy, France, we'd have a numerical representation for every time one of them is trained in the machine learning model. Okay. Could we use that one?
Okay. So we are calling, when we see the word, the names of these cities.
Cities, right? Yeah, exactly. We know that they're cities.
They are all cities.
We can connect them, as capitals.
Okay.
To a country. That's one example. And then we had the gender example earlier: male, female, king, queen. Yeah, I would look at those first as examples. Definitely.
So what about something that is not a noun, not something that is an action?
Like a verb, for example? Yeah. We could, I mean, thinking about structure and grammar, we could maybe take walking, walk, run, running.
Thank you. That's what I was
tenses. Yeah. Okay.
So that's what I was going for. So in a very simple way, thank you, Sam. So in a very simple way, if we just say a word, a verb, an action word, then it is going to have walking, running, and walked, and has walked, will walk, and there are various different. That is what we would do when we are learning any new language. Like when I'm learning Spanish, I get root word, and then I have to understand that for singular, plural, and for in first person, second person, and groups and all that stuff for each of it, but it's the same word. So when we teach AI, we need to basically say that, take that and say that walk is the root word, and everything which whenever you see walking or walked and all that stuff, it means the same thing. And that's the simplistic way by which at least linguists do that. And so that was brought to the world of AI. But then why it is a big deal, and we are talking about this gender equality with the doctor example. When you say doctor, a doctor is a person who's a medical person. And in Spanish, you have gender for words. So it could be a medica or medico, and both are doctors. But when you're talking about verbs, when we're talking about things, there could be context around it, and that would tell you a bit more. So that capturing context is the challenge of every language. So I see a comment here. So refining gender context in NLP training data can reduce the gender bias. So instead of embedding female qualifier, we could use correlated images. If you have old articles that have image and text, we could use the image to enrich the gender context. Yes. So yes, if there are, especially, it doesn't have to be, I mean, why do I care whether the doctor is a male or female? And why do I care about their gender? And because a doctor is a doctor. And if I'm looking for a different kind of doctor who's specialized in something or whatever, right, it's a very different thing. So if you bring in images, that's a whole different ballgame, because then that kind of adds different dimensions. And again, there was this whole thing about dress like a woman. There was a movement called #dress like a woman, because we had a biased politician who made an absurd comment in US. And there were a lot of women in all different jobs who just, shared their picture on Twitter and said, this is how I dress like a woman, and there were astronauts and doctors and scientists and whatnot. So that would again bring a bias from the looks of it. So if you have long hair or short hair, and if you could be biased on judged on gender again, so that should not matter. But I see your point that if you have images, that is one thing by which you could arrive at that. So Suresh is saying basically, is it about stemming? That is, the basic, it's not just, Suresh, it is not just about taking the root word and adding looking at the past tense and present tense. I was giving that as an example of embeddings, word embeddings. So that's the simplistic thing we can understand. But the same word could have different meaning with context. And that is where the bias stems in. I was actually going to show you something which is a tech version of how this is done. But I think we need to still, I don't want to go into the models on this. One of them, I think the most common one is called Glow. So in AI, the way everything is built is you don't start from scratch. You don't take words and sentences and start building that. You typically take a pre-trained algorithm and then you run with it. And so the most common one from the past, before the transformer models came in, is called GLOVE, or the Global Vector of Word Representation. So that's a pre-trained model. People are using this. That is where it's coming from. But I wanted to add one thing, that because linguists created this, so there is a 1956 paper called Distributional Structure, based on usage of the words, that the C words that are used in similar ways and have similar representation, then that captures the meaning. That was the premise of this. Instead of if you just take words and take each word and then say this is the meaning of this word and then map that was called the bag of word approach. So there are algorithms which still do like bag of words and then try to improve that. And then the newer, linguists did this in 1956, but the newer thing in language model is to try to understand context from the word itself. That's where the word embeddings come in. So that's the distributional structure paper from Zellig Harris that is feeding this whole word embeddings, and then there are algorithms that do that. So essentially, what they'll do is they'll take each word and try to understand various dimensions or various ways of using the same word, and then create a whole matrix of a vector of it. And then that's what is processed technically to create the algorithm, or you can use an existing algorithm. Susanna says, doctor was never binary until the last 50 years. So now if you say doctor is running late, is now walking to the building, you assume a male doctor able to walk on 2 legs. You won't assume a female doctor on wheels. That is true. So that adds more dimensions to it, right? So that, I know we are reaching the end of our hour, but why does it matter when we're talking about global South? Why does it matter differently? So if I take a minute to summarize, we talked about how NLP is trained by documents as data, and there are some languages which don't have enough documents, and so we have, the language AI today is centered on a very Western Europe centric set of languages, and we talked about word embeddings is trying to teach the AI the meaning of words as bag of words, or take a word and look at all the different ways the word is being used and try to put them all together as one matrix. And so that's the different dimensions. And that could be done for stemming, as in just language grammar, right? Or it could be based on context. And that is where it gets tricky. So far, so good. And we talked about the doctor and female doctor example of the implicit bias from society. So there is, till recently, there wasn't any regulation on this bias that will come because society had this bias, and then it brings to look at people, and that was propagated into language model. But more and more language applications are cropping up. So the most famous example of this bias against women is this Amazon job AI, which took 10 years of data from Amazon and created a job filtering application to decide who gets to be brought in to be for an interview in a job. And they did not have a single woman in there. And then it took some time to figure that data out. And then there was noise about it. And then they said, okay, we'll go fix it. So there are applications like jobs and stuff which are very critical for us, that is based on this same, built on this bias. And we could say it is societal bias because the guys who were in Amazon, who were building this, getting this data, it didn't strike anyone that every single person in there was a guy. And there were so many people in the team and who built this, launched this, tested this, sent it out to the world. People who got it and said, I'm getting a guy, I'm getting another guy. And they just were very happy in this. It's like, sometimes in conferences, you have this manels, instead of panels, which is all men. They did that for a while. So that goes back to the societal bias. So New York City has come up with a law that if AI has bias, that needs to be tested before it can be used by general public. And so the job ones will get filtered out. And we're talking about, I'm trying to focus here on women equality and the bias that comes from it. But other than that, there is bias where, when you said that's biased against races and things like that, and there is representation and assumption of various different social groups. And to Susanna's point, all of it is social bias that gets propagated. So when you see a group of people and they are doing a certain job, like the female doctor example, then it shows the bias against women. The same thing could be against disabled people. The same thing could be different racial groups. It could be certain cultural groups. And that bias from society is reflected in the language, in the document that is being fed. So that is what I'm talking about when we say there is an opportunity for us to bring in our world, our group, social group, or our view of looking at the world. And there's tons of research in this space. So Yash has done a good job of, I think she's emailed and she did a newsletter post on that, sharing couple research. And if this is interesting, I'm happy to share more with you all. Is there any comment or question on this? So how do you think we can change this? Do you think we can even change this? So my question is, should this be done by research? Should this be done by policy? What is your take on this? Do you think there is hope? If society is biased and we propagate the bias of society, and it's very unfortunate, after I started thinking about this, in every language, there is bias from the society. And then when you look at Global South, there are biases that is propagated from each of the cultures and society. So misogyny and this patriarchy, that is very prevalent. And that is one of those, hey, society already has it and AI is bringing it. Yaini, if you feel like introducing or saying something, you're welcome. Otherwise, that's okay, because you didn't want to talk at the start. So policy is necessary to enforce quality checks for gender bias. So that's a hard way to solve this problem, right? Because that is after the fact, right? So gender bias, you're taking documents and you're feeding it. So, and society has that bias, and everybody who's working on this brings their own implicit bias to the table. Changing, so yes. Okay, so how do you think we can do that? Society has an implicit bias. Every person who's working on this has that bias. So how can we change that? So when we are building AI, so Susanna's example of, a female doctor on wheels. And that is adding multiple dimensions to the bias. That is true. Each person thinks that they're not biased. So we've had this class with Susanna on constructs and on inclusive AI about this whole wheel of different kind of biases, and some biases are good, but most of them are hurting somebody, and how to think about it. I think the one conclusion we had was to have a diverse set of people building AI. So that is happening more and more in technology companies, that it is not built by one profile of tech dudes. And they are adding more diversity, they're adding more dimension. So this was shown in Uber, I believe, where they did not have support for disabled people when you call for an Uber, and you have to get in and immediately click and go get the ride within a short window. Whoever decided that short window was not thinking of somebody in a wheelchair getting to the car. And so if they had one person in the team who was a disabled person, automatically that will have normalized their thinking towards that. So obviously, one way of thinking of reducing bias against women is to have more women in the AI building process. But also within that, I would say, when we're thinking about Global South, that there is a lot of research that is needed to look at language and say, this is how it is. There is a paper, I mean, there's a lot of paper research on gender bias and stuff that Yash has shared, but there's one on, yes, Sam is saying a range of voices at the table when building and designing AI. That's important. Yanni is saying the involvement of more women in this field is important. Policies are a yes to test out systems before they're deployed. Yes. So in terms of research, I believe we need a lot more research. So again, like one of my experience with teaching AI ethics, and I teach this to 4 different master's program at Barcelona Technology School. So to Susanna's point, to Suresh's point, everybody thinks they are not biased, and then they carry implicit bias. But one of my observations was, when we are talking about AI bias, and this example of female doctor, or against different races and cultures, everybody thinks that the other is being impacted. They are aware. Everybody thinks, yes, AI is biased. Yes, it is biased against women. It's biased against minorities, whatever they are thinking as minorities, whichever world they are sitting in. And it is surprising that it comes back to you in some form. So I'm not sitting here saying women, it's biased against women because I'm a woman and I want to be talking about this. I believe because it talks about context, the words, when they were putting in a matrix for the AI to understand it, comes from understanding context. So then it becomes important to define that context with multiple lenses. And that is where I think all of us can contribute, not just as different genders, but from different cultures. And voice is a given because it has various nuances and accents. So the bias and reducing bias is an obvious one. And in certain cultures, there is this concept of respect. So this is what I was thinking about, that motivated me to come and talk to you about this today. In Eastern cultures, there's this concept of hierarchy and respect. So if the person is older or elder to you, then you have a certain case ending for the word on how you speak with them respectfully. If that is a person is a younger person, if it's a male, you speak differently. If it's a female, so when you take that language and you take the words and you find the case endings, you're going to have additional words stemming for respect, to speak to somebody with respect, to speak to somebody without respect. So it looks like a given. Yes, you have that for past tense, present tense, and all the different stemming words, and then you have one for plural, and you have one for elder, right? And it's easy to sit in a Western world and you say, oh, they have word for a person with respect, because in English everything is neutral, and you think it's easy to add that to the bucket. But if you understand that culturally, there are they giving, is not just because the person is an elder, are they giving respect to the person because of a hierarchy? And so they will not refer to the person with singular. So why does it matter? When I'm talking about this gender bias, women are placed socially in a certain bucket, and so based on that, they might have a case ending of how they're referencing women, with respect, without respect. So if it is your mom, you will say with a certain case ending. And based on the hierarchy of the system, you might talk to them differently. If that person is your colleague and you're at work, you will have a respectful ending because it's a professional setting. And if it is somewhere else, they might have a different case ending. Or if they have no respect for a profession or that person for some context, then and how is AI going to know that? And so then that is something that, if you think of, and so it affects women a lot more because women were not working and the patriarchy put them at a lower level in the hierarchy. And so when you take the old language text and try to feed it to the AI, it's going to put women under the no respect bucket. And so then that kind of, like the female doctor, it's going to have the bias propagated further down. So I think there is a lot of research. I believe there's a lot of research that can be done. So for those of you who are listening to this, coming back and watching this later, think about if you think about your identity, what social group you belong in. And like the female doctor, there's this whole female engineer that I have seen, many of you have seen, and that seems like a joke, right? But that exists, and that was not a new thing. That was not an old thing. There were no doctors who were women, and then women came into the mix, and then they became doctors. That's not like that. Engineers, they're engineers, right? But there is this whole female engineers bias thing. So I think there is a lot more research we need to do. So think about it from your construct of your identity on different dimensions of your identity. Is it represented in AI? And thinking about women and gender equality, what is the different context for different cultures, and whether, look at words. And if you're working on something, talk to me. I would like to collaborate with some of you if, I have, projects in the pipeline. So Dan King is saying, one challenge with calling out bias is that, so he's talking about, in politics, if you're trying to call bias, it could be one way or the other, and there could be backlash with that. Sam is saying a sensitivity to cultural context is important. I believe combination of voice, text, and body language can help. Sam, I was very pleasantly surprised when I was digging through these resources. So one of the promises we made is at Global South in AI, we are going to add resources. Paria Sarin, our intern, owns all our channels in terms of web and Slack and all that stuff. So she's building out a link for various resources to learn language AI in various levels. And one of the things, as I was digging through that to contribute to this for her work, I found that sign language, and I know there is an American Sign Language, which is different, but I found that there were so many variations of sign language. And within, even within Global South languages, they have sign languages, and that's different. So
yes.
I
gestures.
Yes. Okay. I did not think of body language. So that's very, very interesting. Yeah. So I think we are, Dan and Susan are beginning a conversation. I will let them take it offline. But I think I've gone past my hour. So I'm going to wrap up here. So my call to you is, if you are, think about different dimensions of yourself and say, is it represented in language? And from your experience, is there something in language that should change, could change? And what would you, I'm not thinking of this major change. Okay, everybody's working on language AI. I'm just sitting here and they're calling women with respect without respect or something like that. I want you to think about the language you know. And if AI is learning that, is it going to represent that equitably? And that's and if culturally, if there is a nuance to it, has that been documented? Is that something that is mainstream? If not, you have a responsibility to publish some research and bring it to teach AI well. So that's my calling. So on globalsouth.ai.org is where I'm going to list all these research papers that I've been promising, the UCLA deck that I was showing. And then there's a very good, for those of you who want to learn the different models, like I said, the different algorithms, and I didn't go into that, but there are different approaches to it and how that whole glove algorithm came about, the bag of words concept and all that. There's a machine learning mastery.com, that site that I follow, who teaches the tech side of everything. And Jason, who runs that, has a beautiful tutorial on that. Jason Brownlee from Australia, I believe. So I would love for, I'll share that. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. So on globalsouthinai.org, just go and see if there's a contribution you can make and submit a 250-word abstract, and look for resources. If you're just in early stages saying, I can't really contribute, I want to. So give us till today's Wednesday here. So give us another day, and by maybe by Friday, we'll try and get you resources, especially the ones that I'm saying there's a lot of research. Let me share those research papers also there, and we'll share other resources as a starting point. So thank you for engaging me. Anything, I would love to explore our context in South Sudan and engage with a linguistic lecturer. I'm glad to join. Thank you, Any. I'm happy to follow offline. I know there is a lot of stuff that is going for African languages with such richness to languages, diversity of languages. We had Chris from Lanfrica here last week at Weekly Wednesday, and he shared the amazing work they are doing to create a repository of resources related to various language and AI for African languages. So I would love to talk to you offline. Maybe, you or your Go Girls can come and submit something for Global South in AI. So with that, I'm going to wrap up, and I'll see you all next week at Weekly Wednesday. And hopefully Yash will be back. And you can come to our Slack, globalsouthinai.slack, Global South in AI, one word, .slack.com. Come talk to us, and we'll help you if you're even thinking about something and you think it's nowhere near ready. It doesn't matter. As long as you think there is some that AI should not be doing or should be changing from what you know of your language. And let me give you one example before I wrap up. My mother tongue is a language called Tamil, and I just had this observation shared with me 2 days back about how I was thinking about our language and how it is represented, and there are models and work being done. There's a Tamil chair in Berkeley University, and I was like, I have nothing to do with it because a lot of other people are working on it, and I'm not this language person, was my attitude about it. And I realized, or I was pointed out, that in our language, while we are talking colloquially, we have some clicks to the language. We'll say, and that's a specific sound that you would hear a person talking Tamil would be saying, and it has a certain meaning, and there are certain clicks like that. And that's not captured by language AI anywhere I've seen. And so I just feel like I'm responsible to do that. And how do I do that? Where do I get started? Seems very overwhelming. So I'm hoping that many of you are seeing this, have things like that, and you feel overwhelmed, join the club. We'll do something about it. And talk to us at Global South in AI. Maybe you're not ready, but at least you'll find that somebody else is doing something similar, or something good always comes out of adding diverse perspectives. So come talk to us. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe, and I will see you next week. Thanks. Okay, thanks for all the lovely comments, everybody. Thanks. Bye. I'm going to stop the live stream first, and I will come. And the easiest thing in the LinkedIn stream where you're watching, I'm going to come and add some of these resources, but the promise is to add